find its height using a trigonometric ratio, and then draw an illustration and explain how the height of the tree was computed. And then the teacher will elaborate the discussion and will ask the student if they have any question regarding the topic discussed, and the teacher will then clarify, elaborate, and expound the part of the lesson that the students ask. And lastly, for the assessment, the teacher will give a quiz to assess the students' learning outcomes, and that would be all. And for the day two, and the learning competency for the day two is finds the trigonometric ratios of special angles. The learner, and for our learning, uh, the learner can solve the trigonometric ratios special angles. The learner can discuss the trigonometric ratios or special angles. And for our preparation, we start with a prayer. And just as before, we will check the students' attendance, and then we will present the objectives of day two. For the day two's objective, we have the students must be able to solve the trigonometric ratios of special angles. Second is discuss the trigonometric ratios of special angles. And for our lesson, proper, we will review. The teacher will ask the following questions. If the students remember the lesson about trigonometric ratios of special angles. What is the lesson about in the previous meeting? What did you learn in the previous lesson? What skill or knowledge did you learn or gain in the past lesson? And for our motivation, we will introduce the game called Bingo Matics or Mat Bingo. So the mechanics of the game is create a group consisting 5 members. The first group who gets a straight line, either diagonal, horizontal, or vertical, in a 4x4 bingo is declared the winner. And we will go into the discussion. For the discussion, the teacher will show a short clip that has connection to real life situation related to the trigonometric ratios of special angles. And for our activities, the students will be grouped into 5 groups, and each group must write a real life problem that can be solved using a 30-degree, 60-degree, 90-degree triangle with a 12-meter hypotenuse, and then they will illustrate the problem with complete solutions. So next, the teacher will ask the students if they have any questions regarding the topic discussed, and then the teacher will then clarify, elaborate, and expand the part of the lesson that the students ask. And then lastly, the teacher will assess the students, and they will be given an assignment that corresponds to the respective lesson.
For the learning competency is illustrate angles of elevation and angles of depression. And then for the specific daily learning outcomes, the learner can calculate the angles of elevation and angles of depression. Second is the learner can examine the angles of elevation and angles of depression. For the daily procedures, for the preparation, the class will start with a prayer. Next, the teacher will have a roll call in each student alphabetically. Next is the presentation of the objectives. The first objective is calculate the angles of elevation and angles of depression. Second is examine the angles of elevation and angles of depression. For the lesson proper, the teacher will ask the following questions to test the students if they remember the lesson about the trigonometric ratios of special angles. What is the lesson about the previous meeting? What did you learn in the previous lesson? What skill or knowledge did you gain in the past lessons? For the motivation, the teacher will introduce the game called Ken Ken Puzzle. The game functions just like the crossword puzzle, but modified into a more mathematical game. Then the students will calculate the angles of elevation and angles of depression. For the discussion, the teacher will discuss the lesson through PowerPoint presentation. After the discussion, activities will be given. The teacher will pair the students, then pick one person to measure his or her height as well as the length of her or his shadow. Then, using the appropriate trigonometric ratio, find the angle, elevation, and sketch the picture. Then the teacher will ask the students if they have any questions regarding the topic discussed. The teacher will then clarify, elaborate, and expound the part of the lessons that the students asked. For the assessment, using a one whole sheet of paper, the teacher will give a written exam. And then for the day 4, the learning competencies uses trigonometric ratios to solve real-life problems involving right triangles. For the specific daily learning outcomes, the learner can examine real-life problems involving right triangles, and the learner can solve real-life problems involving right triangles using trigonometric ratios. For the preparation, the start will class with a prayer, and then the teacher will have a roll call in each student alphabetically, then present the objectives. The first objective is examine real-life problems involving right triangles, solve real-life problems involving right triangles using trigonometric ratios. For the lesson proper, the teacher will ask the following questions to test the students if they remember the lesson about angles of elevation and angles of depression. First is what is the lesson about in the previous meeting? What did you learn in the previous lesson? What skill or knowledge did you gain in the past lessons? For the motivation, the teacher will introduce the game called Hangman. Each student will write their answer in a one-fourth sheet of paper. The students will be given some clues and guess the word or phrases about trigonometric ratios and right triangles. The students who get the highest score will be given a reward. For the discussion, the teacher will present and discuss the lesson using the PowerPoint presentation. And for the activities, the teacher will group the students with 5 members each. Then the students will present a real life problem about right triangles, and then they need to find a solution to the problem. For further elaboration, the teacher will ask the students if they have any questions regarding the topic discussed. The teacher will then clarify, elaborate, and expound the part of the lesson that the students asked. For the assessment, in a one whole sheet of paper, the students will answer a problem solving exam.
So for the day 5, the learning competency illustrates law of sines and cosines. Then for the specific daily learning outcomes, the learner can determine and examine the laws of sines and cosines. The learner can calculate sines and cosines. For the daily procedures, the class will start in a prayer, then by checking the attendance. So for the objectives, at the end of the discussion, the students must be able to illustrate laws of sines and cosines, calculate sines and cosines, examine the difference between sines and cosines. For the lesson proper, The teacher will ask the following question to test the students if they remember the past lessons. Ask the class about the previous lesson, what they learned in the previous lesson, and ask the students if they really learned the past lessons. So for the motivation, instruct students to take notes on the facts about the law of science learned thus far in the video. For each of the practice problems, the teacher will pause the video just before answer is given and allow students to solve the problem on the board. Before the class views the answer, instruct everyone else to solve problem on their own paper while it is being solved on the board. So for the discussion, present the discussion by a PowerPoint presentation. It can be through Canva. After the lesson summary, conduct a final class discussion to clarify remaining questions. So for the activities, make the class into 5 groups. So the instructions, cut rectangular strips of random length out of blue paper, label each with its exact measure. Cut rectangular strips of random length out of red paper. Label the red paper strips with a code. It could be alphabetical, and keep an answer keep with the lengths of the red strips matched to the codes. So you can have students create their own blue strips, but be watchful for groups using a ruler to measure the red strips instead of finding the measure through the use of the law of science operations. For the elaborate, the students will ask some clarification about the laws of sines and cosines. Then the teacher will answer the queries of the students for them to better understand the lesson. And for the assessment, by the next class session by the teacher, she will give a long quiz of the said lessons, the laws of sines and cosines. So it will this will end the lessons by the day 5. So thank you for listening.